Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei married with Rias part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video and also share this video with your friends. I have created my other videos playlist, there you can watch my all videos easily, check out as well. Let's start this video. Issei lay in the grass, a soft wind blowing over him and lightly rustling the tranquil trees above him, sending a single leaf fluttering down onto his nose. Cozy? Issei cracked an eye, wondering who disturbed him. It was an important-looking girl with red hair and blue-green eyes, standing over him with a mischievous smirk. I was. Issei said shortly, closing his eyes again. Napping on the first day of school. Honestly, I should tell the council. Not napping, just existing. Right, existing. You're not high, right? No. Just checking. That was a pretty high thing to say. Well, why don't you just exist at the orientation instead of out here in my garden? It's too noisy over there. Too many people, all talking nonsense. Your garden was quiet, peaceful, and nice. Was being the active word there. You know, if I didn't know any better, I'd think you were shooing me out of my own garden, Issei Hayoto. Do you know me? Issei cracked an eye again, looking once more at the intruding girl. I do. Issei Hayoto, now a second-year, star student. Kind of a loner, but extroverted when he needs to be. I'm mildly honored and mildly creeped out. You're Rias, right? I overhear a lot of talk about you. Rias Gremory. After a brief silence, Rias laughed out loud. She started laughing so much that a tear fell from her eye and she sat down on the ground so she wouldn't fall over. Issei watched her with one eye, wondering what was so funny. Her laughter was contagious, though, and soon he was grinning widely too. After a moment, Rias finally composed herself, wiping her face. It's Gremory. Rias Gremory. Well, I mean, I was pretty close. Rias giggled. If you say so. I'm surprised you didn't know it, honestly. Most of the guys in your class worship the ground I walk on. Humble, aren't you? I didn't mean it like that, it's just weird, I guess. To be treated like a princess by people you don't even know. Rias said, solemn. Normally, this wasn't a topic she'd talk about with someone she'd literally just met, but something about Issei just made him easy to communicate with. I bet. It's weird enough that you know my name, but for a whole class doting over me? I'd die. I much prefer to just sit in the back and be unknown. Hence, why I'm laying in your garden. I'd like that too, I think. Issei let out a good-natured sigh and patted the grass next to him. Rias contemplated for a second, then joined him. It was more relaxing than she thought. So, you're a third-year student, right? Aren't you skipping orientation too? Optional for third years. I had something to take care of with my club, so I did that, and then I just didn't feel like going, so I thought I'd come check on the clump of weeds in my garden. He's still here. Issei laughed, not expecting to be called a clump of weeds. Oh well. You know what just occurred to me? If your boyfriend finds us, he might get the wrong idea. Boyfriend? What on earth are you talking about? Really? The great Rias Gremory herself doesn't have a boyfriend. I'm shocked. Well, there's someone, but I hate his guts. My family is making me marry him after I graduate. Rias cringed at having to mention her fiancé. Please, let's not talk about that. He's pushing the engagement now more than ever. Must be hard being so above us average folk that you still have to worry about outdated stuff like arranged marriages. My heart goes out to you. Tell him to screw off. Rias laughed humorlessly. Yeah, I wish it was that easy. The comfortable silence ensued, both of them just feeling the breeze and enjoying each other's company. I got asked out on a date yesterday. Really? Exciting. Who was it? The girl named Yuma Amano. Not from our school, never even seen the uniform before. What did you say? Told her I'd think about it. I dunno if I'm really feeling the dating life. I kinda like being by myself, you know. Kinda. You said kinda twice. It's a kinda thing, sister. Rias laughed again. They two sat in silence, merely basking in the shade and cool breeze. It's time for us to go, President. Issei and Rias both looked over at the source of the new voice, an elegant-looking girl with crazy long black hair tied up in an orange ribbon. Rias sighed and stood up, Issei following suit. They both dusted themselves off, and Rias turned to Issei, who was preparing to leave. Hey Issei. You don't mind if I call you Issei, right? As long as I don't have to call you Gremory. It's a mouthful. Rias smiled again. Rias is fine. Let me give you my number, you seem fun. It's all a facade. I'm actually super bored. Issei took his smartphone out of his pocket and handed it to her. Rias smirked as she entered her number into his contacts, then handed the phone back. Alright Akeno, I'm good to go. Don't be a stranger, Issei. Rias walked off, leaving the bewildered black-haired girl and Issei standing alone. Akeno, regaining her composure, turned to him. Issei, huh? Just a heads up, you're the only boy she's ever given her number. She eyed him up and down, like one might assess a piece of meat. You're kinda cute. I'm Akeno. Hope we see each other AGAI, and Akeno said, winking and walking in the same direction as Rias. Issei, now alone amongst the trees and grass and flowers of Ria's garden, looked around. He didn't really know what to do with himself, having successfully talked to the two most popular girls in school and apparently impressed both of them. Cute Issei mumbled to himself, cheeks red, as he slowly walked back to the school building with a dumb smile on his face. One of the school idols had called him cute and the other had given him her number. Score. Issei sat alone at the lunch table furthest from the door, tucked in a corner. All by himself, by choice of course, he had a book in hand and a half-finished tray of whatever garbage the school had cooked up that day. It was the same routine just about every day. Issei sat alone, read a book, and went back to class at the end of lunch. Nobody bothered him, he didn't bother anybody. And that was how he liked it. Of course, a certain Riti didn't really care much for any of that. Hi Issei. Rias? You have this lunch? Yeah. You haven't seen me? Rias asked, mildly offended but not really. Yes, I wasn't looking. So, not to be a dick, but what are you doing here? Issei asked, not putting down his book. Rias had just sat down at Issei's table, much to the chagrin of her unofficial fan club. She didn't have a food tray or anything, just her book bag and a smile. What do you mean? I came to sit with you. She answered, smiling. Why? I mean, why me? I'm sure there's a ton of other people you'd rather sit with. Issei asked, tumbling over his words in a way entirely out of character with what Rias had seen so far. Not really. Believe it or not, I don't have just a whole lot of friends, and the ones I do aren't at this lunch. So, I came to sit with you. Is that alright? Rias asked, tilting her head. Issei, out of reasons to deny her, just smiled. In an instant he regained his usual composure. Sure, why not? As long as you can keep your lovers from attacking me, that is. Issei gestured to behind Rias, where the next table over was full of boys glaring holes into him just for being near their idol. Rias just sighed. Ignore them, please, I really wish I didn't have all this attention, to be honest. Well, I dunno. As our school's resident wallflower, let me be the first to tell you it's not all it's cracked up to be. You're the first person to ever sit with me, actually. Rias looked surprised. Really? Issei nodded, finally putting his book down. He memorized the page he was on, closed it, and laid it on the table, giving the read his full attention. Really? I'm not a fan of too many people anyway, but still. Must be nice to be a celebrity sometimes. It has its perks, but I think I'd rather blend in with the crowd. Well, if it makes you feel any better, you blended in well enough that I never noticed you had my lunch. Or that you existed, for that matter. I can't tell if that should hurt my feelings or not. Would you rather I be one of those lapdogs over there? No, definitely not. So, anyway, did you decide if you were going to go on that date with what was her name? Yuma? Yuma, yeah. Nah, I turned her down. Something about her gave me some seriously bad vibes. Well, I guess that's good weight. Seriously bad vibes. What are you, one of those new age mystic types? Do you read fortunes? Rias asked, giggling. Issei wasn't hurt by the comment, in fact. Well, as a matter of fact, I do. So glad you asked. He was delighted. Wait, really? You actually read fortunes? Rias asked, a hint of disbelief in her gaze. Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, not fortunes, in the literal sense, more like personalities. Want me to do yours? Issei asked, already digging around in his backpack. Sure, why not? Is it magic? Rias asked, smirking. Now, that was a bit of a loaded question, but Issei answered in kind. Sure is. Everything is, if you look at it right. But the triumphant aha. Issei pulled a deck of odd cards from his backpack. Tarot cards? Don't you know those are just a gimmick? Rias asked, intrigued nonetheless. Oh, by themselves, sure. It's you and me that make the magic red. Check it out. In a fluid and obviously well-practiced sleight of hand trick, Issei flicked the cards out over their table, spreading them evenly out in front of Rias. There were 22, one for each of the major arcana of the tarot deck. The girl looked on in admiration for the neat display of card skills. Well, let's get started. How are you feeling today, sister? Issei asked, a glint in his eye and a smirk on his face. Well, don't tell me. Pick a card. Issei said, gesturing out over the upside-down cards. Rias pointed to one, and Issei slid it over towards himself, then pointed back at the rest. What's something you really want? More than anything else? Issei asked, only slightly more serious. Rias, without hesitation, picked another card. Issei, once again, slid it towards himself. Great. 2 more questions. Are you sure this is magic? I feel like I'm getting swindled at a carnival. The Luva carnival, huh? Anyway, next question. How do you see yourself? Rias pondered this one for a second, but hesitantly picked a card. Once again, Issei slid the face-down card over to him before asking his last question. Alright, last one. Ready? Sure, I'm eager to see what you've got. You and I both. So, here it is. What's your natural hair color? No way in hell it's that red. Rias, not expecting that at all, laughed out loud. Issei noted how pristine and beautiful her laugh was and couldn't help but smile a bit with her. Once she calmed down, she wiped a tear from her eye and inhaled deeply, trying to compose herself. Well, if you must now, it is naturally that red, thank you. Rias said sarcastically, twirling her hair around her right index finger, making Issei chuckle. Alright, for real this time. What would you like to do with your life? Now, this time, Issei didn't let her pick just any card. Of the 19 remaining cards, Issei pulled 10 away, leaving a row of 9 in front of Rias. She looked at him with a question in her eyes. Would you pull those away? I was about to pick one of them. She asked, pointing at the cards he'd pulled away. I don't want you to, Issei replied, looking her in the eyes and pushing the line of cards straight off the table and onto the floor. Well, maybe I will anyway, Rias said, before ducking under the table and grabbing one of the falling cards. Issei, now put in a compromising position of sitting at a table with Rias Gremory on all fours underneath him, was suddenly subject to the death stares of every kid in the room. Rias came back up, with a card in her hand, facing away from her and towards Issei. Idly, he remarked that her card was the Hierophant, upside down. How very fitting, he thought. Smiling like she'd won, she slapped the card face down and slid it towards Issei, amongst the other 3 she'd chosen. Alright, let's see what we got. Issei, making a big show out of the whole thing, acted like he was about to flip them all over. Before sliding every card, even the one she hadn't chosen, back into his backpack. Rias looked flabbergasted. Issei had a shit-eating grin. Would you do that? Rias asked, trying to understand. Issei began picking up the cards on the ground, ignoring the girl. She ducked under the table, waving at him. Hello Earth to Issei. Finished collecting his cards, Issei came back up, Rias following him. He sighed, then looked her in the eyes. You're probably thinking, what was the point of me picking all those cards if he was just gonna put the back in the backpack, right? Issei asked, smiling. Well yeah. Rias said, mildly confused. See, here's the real trick. You said it yourself, tarot cards don't have any magic to them. The magic is in the presentation. Riddle me this, what's the first question I ask you? How my day was going. And it's going pretty good, right? Yes, but how did you know that? The look on your face. What was the second question? What I want more than anything else. See, that's where the real magic kicked in. That first question. A throwaway to make sure you know how to play the game. Know what was important about drawing the second card, though? Rias didn't reply, she just tilted her head. It wasn't the card itself, Issei leaned in, getting closer to Rias. It was how fast you picked it, he explained, whispering. Rias blinked. What? See, you could have picked any card in this deck and it wouldn't have mattered. It's still just a card, laid out in a random order that you never would have known. That's why a tarot deck is so unreliable. Now, what was reliable was how fast you picked. Because you picked so quickly, I'm guessing you only want one thing, more than anything else, and you know exactly what it is? Issei asked, squinting. Rias, impressed, sat back. Wow. No, you're right. But that's more of a mind game than anything. Oh, totally. But we aren't done yet. Knowing what I do about you, I'd wager to say that all you want is to break free of that marriage, right? With a dickhead. Rias nodded slowly, pursing her lips. Now she understood the game and realized Issei may be smarter than she gave him credit for. And then, for the third question. I asked you how you see yourself and you hesitated, that means you don't really know. Maybe you'd like to see yourself one way, but your actions paint a different picture. Maybe you want to be one person, but can't help but be someone else. Who could say? I don't know you well enough to guess one way or another. But then, what really told me a lot was the last question. Really? Enlighten me. Rias, now extremely interested in Issei's parlor tricks, was eager to see what he'd glean from the rest of his game. He'd been right on every count so far, though she might not admit it. Don't mind if I do. What I did was give you 19 options. Then, when you were about to pick, I took most of them away. You didn't like that, and you went for one of the stolen ones anyway. What that tells me is that you hate when people try to decide stuff for you, and if I had to hazard a guess, it means that all you want to do in your life is to make your own path instead of other people making it for you. Right. Rias was silently stunned. All of that was stuff that you could easily figure out, given that you knew her for a while, but Issei had talked to her all of twice, maybe 15 minutes altogether, and he'd already pieced together major parts of her personality and life goals based on a little game. She was more than impressed, even if it was just some mind tricks. Wow, no, that's completely right. You got me. I'm impressed. Rias said, giving him a little round of applause. Issei gave a little bow, grinning. See what I meant, though? The cards don't really mean anything, it's just you and me making the magic. That is neat, I will admit. Know any other fun tricks? Well, just one more. Issei put his hands together, covering his 4 left fingers with his 2 leftmost fingers on his right hand. When he pulled his right hand away, it appeared as if his left thumb had disappeared, the classic vanishing thumb trick. The two shared another laugh, Rias yet again surprised by Issei's goofy jokes, only for them to get cut off by the school's bell. Lunch was over. As everyone began collecting their things and moving to their next classes, Issei and Rias stopped in front of the door. They were going separate directions. Oh, well. That was the most fun I've had in a while, actually. I hope you don't mind if I sit with you more often. Oh sure, don't let me stop you. As long as your fan club stays the hell away from my kneecaps, I'm good. Rias laughed. See you later, Issei. Issei sat in his last class of the day, twiddling his thumbs and waiting for the sweet release of the bell to set him free. The class was English, and even though he was already fluent, they made him take it regardless. Of course, nobody knew that he was fluent except the student council president, who was also an apt speaker of the language. You still need to take it to refine your grammar if nothing else. The bespectacled class president had said, in English. Issei harumphed in his seat, drawing glances from some kids nearby. If you're so eager to leave, Mr. Hayoto, why don't you translate this for me? The teacher asked, before writing down a phrase on the board in Japanese. Because nobody knew Issei was fluent in English, though many suspected, he would always pretend to be bad at it in class to annoy his instructor. That said, whenever the teacher got a little full of herself, he liked to remind her to stay humble. Can you imagine an imaginary menagerie manager managing an imaginary menagerie? Issei said flawlessly, shooting the teacher a cocky grin. She was a particularly abrasive person and had chosen a tongue twister in the hopes of stumping even Kuo's up-and-coming star student. She had failed, and the disgruntled teacher made an almost unnoticeable TCH sound before returning to her normal lecture. Right when she began, however, the bell finally rang, signaling the end of the day. Issei was out of the classroom before anyone could say hey, and he was quick to make his escape. Or, at least, he attempted to. For what seemed like the millionth time in the past 2 days, his solitude was foiled by a repeat. Where are you headed off to in such a hurry, Issei? Rias asked, approaching him from behind. Issei sighed, then turned around and smiled. It was a strange thing to be addressed so casually by the school's #1 beauty. Just headed home. Got a little stuffy in that classroom, so I wanted to bail. You? I'm heading home myself. Surprisingly enough, I've got nothing to do this afternoon. Rias, being who she was, almost always had herself wrapped up in some kind of club or school business. Cool. The two of them walked amidst all the other people in the hallway, both kids sticking out like sore thumbs. Issei, because of his vehement refusal to wear the school's uniform properly, he preferred to open it up and wear a t-shirt, and Rias because of her hair, naturally. So how's your day been? Rias asked, smiling her usual evanescent smile. Boring as hell, the usual. Thought about skipping for a while, but when I went into the hallway to leave, I saw the council press glaring at me. Gave me the chills. Rias laughed. Yeah, Sona doesn't take any nonsense. Sona? I thought it was a sauna or something like that. Guess I misheard. No, you're right. We've just been close for a while, so I call her Sona. Rias explained, not skipping a beat. Touché. I've never been able to skip on her watch, that girl's a devil. More than you know. Rias said with a smirk. And, hey, don't skip classes. That's bad. She said matter-of-factly, but with a smile and a good-natured undertone. Issei snorted. If I had $1 for every time someone said that, I'd be rich. Way I see it, I'm still at the top of my class, skipping or not. Got me there. What's your secret, anyway? You don't seem the type to study. It just comes naturally to me, Issei said, shrugging. No secret to it. Must be nice. Ha. I thought you of all people would understand how wrong that is. Issei said with a smile, before realizing exactly what he said. Rias was looking at him oddly, and she had every right to. That had been an odd and slightly presumptuous thing to say. Ah, sorry. That came out wrong. Anyway, you mentioned that you're not busy. Issei asked, changing the subject. Rias sensed a lot of moving parts behind his previous statement, but chose not to pursue it for the time being. She filed away that particular slip-up for later and kept talking in stride. Completely free. Why? Wanna go grab something to eat? I'm starving. Issei offered, rubbing his poor neglected stomach. Behind him, the feral growls of all Rias fanboys could be heard rolling across the hallway. In their defense, it did sound an awful lot like he was asking her out. Sure, why not? Rias answered, and Issei mentally did a backflip. What did you have in mind? A raiment stand. The look on Ria's face was one you could only call confusion. Issei had brought them to a duck-in raiment shop with a wooden exterior doorframe that had the words "Best in Japan" worn away till only BAP remained. A faded grey tarp acted as a door right next to a long window that couldn't be seen through from the outside. Yeah. Why the long face? Never had street food before? Issei asked, sensing her discomfort. Well, not really, no. Rias answered, slightly shaking her head. Oh, right. I forget that great Rias Gremory comes from a seat of nobility, too high in the clouds to deign us commoners with their presence. Oh, woe is me. Issei began to dramatically act as if he'd been mortally wounded, kneeling on the ground and clutching his chest. Rias laughed, but at the same time wondered how Issei could do something like that without being embarrassed. They were in the middle of downtown Kuo, surrounded by strangers who shot him a cacophony of odd glances. It's Gremory. I feel like you're messing it up on purpose, now. Rias said, rubbing her chin in mock detective style. That's exactly what I'm doing, Gremory. So, you're not too good for a raiment stand, right? I can vouch for the quality. Issei said, getting slightly more serious. Only slightly, though. He stood up off the ground, brushing off his legs. Rias knew what Issei was doing. She was confident that he had a firm grasp of her personality, so the line about being too good for a raiment stand hit her just right, and she knew he did it on purpose. Of course not, let's do it. Rias said, waving off his comment. Great. My treat. Issei said, and walked under the tarp door. The interior of the raiment stand was little more than a bar and some stools, with barely enough room to move around in. Issei confidently walked in and took the stool nearest the door, while Rias was slower and looked around quite a bit. After taking in the meager sights, she sat down next to him. They had apparently been the only ones there for a while, because the stand's owner and sole employee was asleep in a chair behind the bar. Hey Pops, wake up. Issei said, throwing a coaster at the man. He hopped up with urgency. The owner was an elderly Japanese man, long in his years but as young at heart as any kid could ever be. He was wearing a white cloth around his head tied back like a bandana and a black apron over a white jumpsuit. When he saw Issei, he cackled a laugh and stretched his hand out over the counter. Issei reciprocated a hearty laugh and bumped his fist against the old man's. Thought you were dead, Pops. Issei said, smirking. Not yet, not yet. Hey you little shit, who's your girlfriend? First time you ever come here not by yourself and you don't even introduce me? The man said excitedly, talking to Issei like a family member would. Well, I didn't have to worry about it when you were snoozing. This is Rias, my friend from school. Issei said, waving in her general direction. Rias, this is Chow, a dirty old man who pretends to run a raiment shop. Rias smiled and Chow laughed out loud, playfully reaching over the bar and tussling Issei's hair. They seemed far closer than just a shop owner and a regular customer. She noted that there were a few picture frames on the bar, and all of them were of Chow and Issei save for one, a dusty picture of what looked like a young Chow, standing with a foreign woman and giving a thumbs up at their newly purchased raiment shop. It's good to meet you, Mr. Chow. Rias said, slightly bowing her head. Chow snorted a laugh. You too, sweetheart. Chow got really close to Rias and narrowed his eyes. So, what's he paying you? Not nearly enough. Rias said sarcastically, making Chow roar with laughter and Issei crack a grin. Without another word, Chow began to pull items and ingredients from shelves and cabinets behind and underneath the bar, and Rias realized there wasn't a menu in front of her, or anywhere for that matter. Looking for this? Issei asked, holding up a menu. This is actually the only menu in the whole place. Well, I was. Should I not be? Rias asked, sensing that it might not be a normal restaurant. Nah, Chow's got it. Yeah, Chow's got it. Chow said, looking up from a pot of boiling water and flashing a thumbs up. I see. Rias briefly wondered what kind of place she'd found herself in, that there was only one employee, and he didn't even ask what she wanted before he started cooking. This was quite a switch from what she'd normally been exposed to, and she wasn't really sure how to act. You've never been anywhere like this, have you? Issei asked, catching on immediately. No, not even almost. It's interesting. Rias answered, trying to find the right word. The shop was nothing special, even a little rundown, but there was something uniquely picturesque and lovely about the whole thing. It had the perfect homely coffee shop aesthetic and seemed like somewhere you could stay for hours without realizing any time had passed at all. She liked the atmosphere quite a lot, it was a far cry from the ritzy places she was accustomed to. Glad you like it. Chow's shop is just about my favorite place. Damn right. Chow won. Chow said, masterfully flipping an egg in a skillet. Issei and Chow whooped together like they were at a sporting event cheering for their favorite team, and Rias couldn't help but laugh. They were just so familial. She was almost jealous. They're probably wondering who the old guy is, huh? Why we're so close, I mean. Issei said, almost as if reading her thoughts. I was. You two are like peas in a pod. Rias said, smiling. Issei was a dirty street orphan. Chow took him in. Chow said, proudly gesturing to one of the pictures on the bar. In it, Chow was making ramen with a 10-year-old Issei, who looked to be having the time of his life. He's right. I left orphanage after orphanage and just came back to Chow, so eventually CPS or whoever just let me hang around. Now I'm more than old enough for it not to matter, but yeah, we got tight. Issei explained. And? I don't know if CPS Child Protective Services has a Japanese equivalent or anything even remotely similar, but we're assuming pretending it does. Roll with it. Rias was silently stunned. Was Issei an orphan? She never would have guessed. But that would explain why he and Chow were so close they pretty much were family. Wow. Rias said, not really sure what else she could say. Brie best in Japan specialty ramen, ready to go. Chow said, saving her from having to come up with anything else. He set 3 black earthenware bowls down on the bar, one in front of each of the 2 teens, and one on his side of the bar in front of himself. The miso ramen itself looked delicious, with a fried egg on one side of the fluffy noodles and a slab of tender pork half submerged in the savory golden broth. Seaweed and spices were scattered around the dish, and the bowl itself made the whole thing pop just that much more. Wow, that was fast. Rias remarked. He'd only just begun to cook, it seemed like. Chow is the best ramen chef in the country. Of course he's fast. Issei said, matter-of-factly. Well, go ahead. Chow said, agreeing with Issei and nodding his head towards the bowls. The 3 of them clapped their hands and bowed their heads. Thanks for the food, they all said in unison. Rias, not being a native in Japan, was mostly unfamiliar with the ins and outs of their odd pre-meal ritual, but she knew the basics enough to act like she knew what she was doing. That is to say, she'd only ever seen it in an anime before moving to Japan. Issei and Chow both dug in, but Rias was hesitant. The 2 of them are like madmen, slurping and smacking and burping and making all manner of undignified noises, not unlike how starved cavemen might have acted 10,000 years ago. The poor girl was conflicted. Every proper bone in her body, which is to say all of them, screamed at her to use restraint and decent manners, but they both seemed to be going at it, and something about the sight made her just a little jealous. See, in her high and mighty household, she'd have been heavily reprimanded if she'd ever been seen eating like that, and she'd always had a bit of a secret desire to just pig out over a meal without a care in the world. Issei and Chow were doing just that, and she wanted to jump in and join them, but at the same time she still felt her family's morals creeping down her neck. Inwardly, Rias scoffed. She realized just how stupid she was being. What influence did her family have on her here, in a dinky ramen shop in downtown Kuo? She slowly began to tear into the ramen herself, drawing a mildly surprised, but also just a little prideful expression from Issei. He was a bit spooked to see someone so proper devouring something like that, but also proud she'd cast off her family's conditioning. He didn't have the first clue about her home life, but he suspected that she'd be punished if she'd ever eaten like that amongst family. Plus, the tarot card she'd drawn earlier in the day the Hierophant reversed spoke about the rejection of family values and the casting off of rules. He began to see that in her, now. You got a crush on her or something? You're looking at her weird. Chow said, in accented English. Nah, just thinking about how she probably doesn't get to eat like this often. Strict family. Arranged marriage is strict, even. Issei replied in similarly accented English, Rias looking between the both of them with an odd expression. See, they thought they were being sly and talking around her. They might have been, if Rias didn't speak English too. Ah. Chow spat, disdain written on his face. Must be tough. Glad she's enjoying it. Of course. Rias would have spoken up in English and ruined their secret chat, but chose not to. They hadn't said anything bad, after all, but she did feel odd. Nobody had ever pitied her for being part of the Gremory family before. And slowly, she realized something. Issei and Chow weren't even related, but they were more family to each other than her actual parents had been to her for a long time. Rias loved her mother and father, sure, and they absolutely loved her, but their desire to micromanage her life, culminating in this awful arranged marriage, had driven a wedge between them, and they certainly weren't exceedingly close nowadays. She felt a pang of jealousy for the kinship Issei and Chow shared, but didn't react to them otherwise. She just pretended not to speak English and blankly looked between them. Sorry. Issei started, back in Japanese now. Chow is actually the person who taught me English. I learned it while I lived in the States. Chow explained, smiling. You lived in America? Rias asked, intrigued. She'd never been to America, but she'd heard it was the closest to where she was from, culture-wise. Sure did. Met my wife there. Chow said, a proud smile on his face. Is she the one in that picture? Rias asked, beginning to put the pieces together. My better half for 50 years. Chow said, the first calm words he'd spoken so far. He sighed happily, and Rias caught a glimpse of longing in his eyes. So Rias, how's your first time at a lowly ramen shop? You look like you like it. Issei remarked, subtly changing the subject. He didn't want Rias to ask what happened to Chow's wife, not because it would bother him, but because she'd probably get uncomfortable with the answer. It's fantastic. You're very talented, Mr. Chow. Rias said, smiling. She really meant it. She hadn't eaten ramen very many times, but she could tell he was top-notch. Maybe even the best in Japan, truly. Damn right. And don't say mister, it makes me feel old. Chow said, waving his hand dismissively. Wouldn't want that, would we? Issei said with a sarcastic smirk, and he and Chow shared a big laugh while Rias giggled. Oh, right. Almost forgot. Chow said, standing up from his position at the bar. He dug around in a bag under the bar, and after a second he pulled up with an ornate bottle of sake in 3 cups. Got some of the good stuff. He said, handing the bottle to Issei. Issei read the label, then whistled in appreciation. It was some good stuff. Chow's shop was by no means mainstream, but every so once in a while, a businessman would stop in and have ramen and company that was so good, he'd send Chow a gift as thanks. This time, it was a fancy bottle of sake. Issei handed the bottle back to Chow, who began to pour it in the small sake cups. Do you drink? Issei asked Rias, who nodded. Normally with meals, but a couple of times recreationally. My family has a high alcohol tolerance. Rias explained, shedding some light on why a proper teenage girl was okay with drinking sake from a sleazy guy in a ramen shop. Cool. This stuff is low percentage, so a cup with a ramen won't get anybody drunk. Are you cool with that? Issei asked. Inwardly Rias smirked. The thought of liquor getting her drunk was laughable. Sure, she said. Needing no further instruction, Chow placed the now-filled glasses in front of the 2 teens, a bowl of ice in each. They all began to sip sake as they ate and talked, and to Rias, it felt less like a meal and more like a social affair. She was greatly enjoying herself, and for a moment, Rias was just a normal girl out for lunch with a friend. She wasn't Rias Gremory, next in line to the Gremory throne. She wasn't Rias Gremory, fiancé to Riser Phoenix. She wasn't a king or an heir or even a devil. She was just Rias. Issei's friend from school. And she liked it. Then Ria's phone buzzed and her wonderful fantasy came crashing down. It was Akeno, asking for Rias to quickly come to their club room at Kuo. She sighed in disappointment, or more like annoyance. Gotta go? Issei asked, anticipating that she'd have to leave at some point. For her type of person, free for a whole afternoon meant nothing to do at this very moment, but subject to change. Ria smiled, but there was a slight sadness to it. Yes, I do. Urgent club business, Akeno says. Thank you very much for the meal, Miss Chow, it was wonderful. She began to reach for money out of her pocket, only to be stopped by both Issei and Chow. In the house, Chow said with a wide smile. My treat, remember? Don't sweat it, I'll find some way to mooch off you. Issei said, smiling. Ria smiled back, standing up from the stool. Thank you both. See you tomorrow, Issei. She said, waving at him and Chow as she exited the shop. They both waited a second until they were sure she was out of earshot, then Chow yanked Issei over the side of the counter. How the hell did you get a girl like that to hang out with you? Chow yelled with a grin, giving the boy a noogie. Issei laughed, not really sure himself. Thanks for watching this video. Part 1 is over. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the playlist that I have created and enjoy. Link is in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.